Well, I figured I wouldn't keep people waiting any longer, so we're back with the start of Season 3. Today we'll be looking at The Blessing Way, Episode 1 of Season 3. The Blessing Way debuted September 22nd, 1995, and follows Agent Scully as she desperately tries to uncover Mulder's whereabouts while also trying to prove the men that killed him also killed his father. We pick up right after the events of the previous episode, as the train car is still spewing fire, and I have no idea how any human being could have survived that. Military burst into Albert's home, and it's rare to see cigarette-smoking man so frazzled. He desperately wants to know where Mulder is, and more importantly, the tape.
I want Mulder and I want those files!
You'll find nothing here.
Scully arrives on the scene wanting to know what happened, and it looks like they did a real number on Albert, and even worse on his grandson. Scully makes her way to the train car, but Mulder is nowhere to be found. Although maybe she should try looking inside the train car? Thinking Mulder to be dead, Scully makes her journey back home when she is stopped by a military helicopter.
Where are the files?
In the trunk.
The soldier that goes in her trunk to retrieve the file starts rummaging through her purse first, but somehow doesn't immediately notice the files just sitting out there in plain view. They don't want some printed files though, and instead want the tape, which Scully informs them Mulder has, so the tape may be a bit on the burnt side at the moment. When Scully finally does get back the following day, she's suspended without pay for not listening to her superiors. But if you can read Skinner's body language, I don't think this was his decision.
I've told you everything I know. To the best of my knowledge, Agent Mulder is dead.
When Scully makes it back to the office, she finds the tape is missing, which isn't surprising because if Mulder's being investigated for having a tape with highly sensitive material on it, I'm shocked the entire office hasn't been turned upside down. Oh, and what is this? The first official appearance of the Syndicate?
We have control. The files have been recovered and the men involved in their theft have been removed without incident.
CSM is full of shit though because he knows he doesn't have the tape, but tells the others that he recovered it and that Mulder is dead, despite having no proof that either thing he just said is true. The following morning, some young boys on the reservation visit Albert's home to let them know they found buzzards flying above the quarry where the train car is.
When I see them circling in the desert, this can only mean that something has died or that death is close.
Albert recalls a time from his youth when he himself too found a body in the quarry, something so foul that even the buzzards would not eat it. And lo and behold, there just so happens to be a body in the exact spot Albert remembered. Well, that body turns out to be Mulder, who was just hanging on by a thread.
The FBI man would have surely died had he not stayed underground, protected like the jackrabbit or the fox.
They bring Mulder's body to a hut where they plan on performing the Blessing Way chant, a chant that Albert claims he saw performed in his youth that will help summon up the holy people in the hopes that they might be able to heal Mulder. Meanwhile, later that night, Scully gets dragged out of her bed by a late-night caller. I can only imagine just how good-looking this guy must be to get Scully up out of bed.
Frohickey?
I know it's late, but I heard the news. Maybe I should go. Pardon my presumptuousness.
What is Frohickey up to? He comes over with some booze? Does he think because Mulder may be dead that he can just swoop in on Scully? He's got something interesting for her though. Turns out the Thinker, aka Kurt Cobain, aka the man that hacked the files in the first place, was found dead in a landfill. But Scully thinks she may have something here, because the Thinker was killed the day after Mulder disappeared, which she may be able to link to the murder of Mulder's father.
I watched my father perform the chants as a young boy and saw their healing magic.
Albert begins the Blessing Way chant and things start to get trippy as Mulder's subconscious is just floating through space. I don't know if these are the holy people, but they're kinda terrifying. They can also apparently morph into dead people. Deep Throat tells Mulder it's not his time. He's not there to ask Mulder to join him. Instead, he simply asks that Mulder goes back. I need to bring something up though. The bullet hole in Mulder's chest. Scully shot him in the shoulder. If she had shot him where this bullet hole is right now, I highly doubt he would have survived. At least we know how Mulder got out though. When the poor aliens were gassed, there was a hole inside the car that they could squeeze out of. How that hole and tunnel got there though, who knows? Maybe it was like a Shawshank thing, and the aliens slowly made the hole over time. Anyways, he's visited by his father, who rambles on about lies he made to Mulder and truths that Mulder still needs to uncover. But if this really is his father, then why not spill the beans? Just tell him everything he needs to know so when he wakes up, he can go and expose everything. Instead, even in the afterlife, he has to be so vague about everything. The following day, Scully makes her way back to the FBI, but now she has to go through the front door like a commoner. Ugh.
You carrying your weapon?
No?
Even though she set the metal detector off, the guard finds nothing on her, so she heads inside to speak to Skinner. Scully shows Skinner the newspaper clipping and tells him if he runs the ballistics from Mulder's father's shooting and the hacker's shooting, there's a possibility they could come back as a match, which would exonerate Mulder from the murder. But Skinner isn't much help and tells her if she really wants to help Mulder, then she needs to bring him that tape.
Did you ask her about the tape? She says she doesn't have it. So what she says?
Now, why would CSM be asking Skinner if she has the tape when he told his partners the whole thing was taken care of? It's almost like even in these shady groups, they all lie to one another. Before Scully leaves, a light bulb goes off in her head, and she decides to go through the metal detector once again. When the guard runs the wand over the second time, it beeps when it goes over her neck.
What do you think it could be?
I don't know. It's embedded in your soft tissue here.
I wonder what could be in the base of her neck. I'm sure it has absolutely nothing to do with her abduction. The doctor seems to think it could be buckshot from the line of duty, but I would think Scully would know if she's taken any buckshot recently. Meanwhile, it looks like Mulder may be coming too. Albert even gives him a little sponge bath because I'm sure he smells so bad that you could probably see the stink lines coming off of him.
It's definitely not buckshot.
Well, no shit it's not buckshot, Doc. It actually looks more like a computer chip. What if Scully is actually a cyborg? Scully shows her sister the implant and Melissa suggests maybe she go under hypnosis. It may help to jog her memory. Scully quickly balks at the idea, but then actually goes along with it. Maybe because it's her sister that suggested it? I would have a hard time believing she would try it if Mulder had brought it up.
A man took me. There was a light, and...
The whole thing doesn't really get Scully anywhere, and as quickly as it began, the whole thing was already over. When Scully arrives home, however, she notices Skinner leaving her apartment. Now just what the hell was he up to? Back with Mulder, who now seems to be in a much better condition. Before he gets to leave, Albert gives him a set of rules he must abide by like he's a gremlin. He can't work, change his clothes, or bathe for 4 days. And if this is all he has to do, then I must be the Blessing Way champion.
You asked for them during your worst fevers.
The funny part about this whole thing is David doesn't actually like sunflower seeds. Oh no, Albert, don't ruin the sand art. After all that excitement, Scully calls Skinner, telling him she saw him leave her building earlier, to which he denies, because of course he does. It's always hard to pinpoint just where Skinner's loyalty lies, especially when cigarette smoking man is always in his office.
But I have a very strong feeling that your son is going to be found.
Oh, my goodness gracious.
I think he's still alive.
How do you know?
Scully meets with Mulder's mother at his father's burial, and she believes Mulder is still alive. And why does she think Mulder is still alive? Well, she had a dream about him the prior night, and that was pretty much all she needed to be convinced. A member of the syndicate is also there and asks to speak to Scully in private. He tells her that her life is in danger and someone is going to try and kill her. Either 2 men at her apartment tonight, or someone she knows personally who will ask her to meet somewhere. Now you might be wondering why someone who's part of the syndicate would warn her, but it's because her death would only bring attention to his group, so he's trying to protect his own ass more than anything.
What kind of business are you in?
We predict the future. The best way to predict the future is to invent it.
Sounds like every politician out there these days. This show is supposed to be fiction, correct? Mulder's mother returns home and looks at some poorly photoshopped home photos when Mulder suddenly makes his return. I don't think sneaking up behind the woman was the smartest idea though. They don't get much time to reminisce, however, because Mulder needs his mother's help.
I need to know more about Dad. Who these people are.
He wants to know about the men his father worked with, and the funniest part is how everyone in the photo is made to look younger, except for Deep Throat, who I guess just always looked old. She doesn't seem to have a very good memory, but Mulder thinks the men in the photo may have something to do with his sister's abduction.
Okay, look, I want to come over. I want to talk to you. Are you going to be there for a while?
Yeah, I will.
Okay, I'll see you in a bit.
That night, Scully gets a call from her sister who just wants to check on her after she left her hypnosis session from earlier. The two ladies decide to talk at Scully's place, but after a second call to her place that immediately hangs up, Scully knows something is wrong. She tries calling her sister but doesn't get her in time. Even though Scully's badge and gun were taken earlier, she pulls a second gun from her nightstand because she's like the female version of John Wick. She just has guns everywhere.
Scully, get in the car. I need to talk to you. It's very important.
Skinner pulls up, and the syndicate member did say she would be approached by someone she knew that would try to kill her, and yet she still goes with Skinner. Scully takes Skinner to Mulder's place and quickly pulls her gun on him. I guess she did take what the well-manicured man said to heart. She forces Skinner to sit on the couch and wants to know who sent him and why. Meanwhile, Melissa enters Scully's place to have their little talk, and she gets shot by Krychek and Louise. The real awkward part is Nicholas Lee and Melinda McGraw were dating at the time, so I guess this is one way of terminating a relationship. Scully continues to interrogate Skinner, and it would be really awkward if Mulder were to walk in on this situation. Skinner claims he has the tape, but before he can pull it out, someone approaches Mulder's door, and now we have a good old-fashioned Mexican standoff. The Blessing Way is a solid episode. I had actually completely forgotten how Mulder survived the train car burning, so I was waiting for something a little more convoluted, but a whole dugout by the aliens or whatever they are, it works just fine. Scully discovering her implant is only going to bring some more hard times for the poor girl, like she hasn't had it hard enough at this point. And where does Skinner's loyalty lie exactly? He's always so hard to gauge. You know he wants to help the agents, but then he has cigarette smoking man hovering around him like a hawk. We also have the Syndicate making their true debut. We've seen other group members before, but this is the first time we really see the group all together, so there's going to be some interesting things coming from them as well. The Blessing Way has an 8.6 in IMDb, and I myself would go with an 8. I like this one a good amount. However, not everyone felt the same way. Most critics split on it, and it had an overall mixed to positive reaction. One reviewer named Emily St. James from the AV Club, and who cares about the AV Club, claimed Albert was perhaps the worst character in the series. The worst character in the series. Albert. So I'm guessing this person has never actually watched The X-Files. They even wrote a book too called Monsters of the Week, the complete critical companion to The X-Files. But if this is the kind of garbage they spit out, then I know what book I'm never gonna buy. The previous episode had also received criticism from Karens that were offended by the portrayal of the Navajo. Meanwhile, actual Navajo scholars spoke with Chris about some inaccuracies with regards to their culture, so to make sure they got things right this second go-around, Chris was invited to Navajo chants and rituals, but not just to watch, he was asked to actively participate. Chris saw the whole thing as a great honor, but the one downside to the whole thing was he had to sit cross-legged for 8 hours. I do that for 5 minutes and I just want to end myself. But you see, this is the big difference between one group that just gets offended on someone else's behalf and the second group that says, you know what, you tried, but we're going to teach you how it's really done. During the beginning of writing the episode, Chris had lost one of his parents, and as hard as it was, he actually used it as inspiration. He felt he could explore how Mulder may react to the death of his father, which was also kind of therapeutic for himself. This episode was also one of his favorites to write. Producer Frank Spotnitz said about the episode, "The expectations were very high, coming after a summer's worth of anticipation to see how Mulder got out of the boxcar. We knew we had to answer that question and still leave an intriguing enough dilemma at the end of the show to bring viewers back for the third and final part. I also thought it was a big gamble to do all that Indian mysticism stuff. I thought a lot of people would not necessarily respond to that. So I was nervous about that, but very excited about the Scully storyline and the way all of that played out with Mulder and Skinner. During the chanting scenes, a sand painter was brought in to work on the sand paintings. This took an entire day to do, but only mere seconds for Albert to completely ruin. The scenes in the rock quarry were the same quarry from the previous episode. Even though several months had passed between the filming of both episodes, the rocks were still pretty red and only needed a light touch-up. However, when the Navajo men are searching for Mulder, you can clearly see the line where they stopped painting the rocks. Like mentioned earlier, this episode brings the introduction of the Syndicate group and one of its most prominent members, the Well-Manicured Man. The Well-Manicured Man was only supposed to appear in this episode and the next one, but he was such a hit with fans that the producers felt he should continue on in the series. English actor John Neville played the Well-Manicured Man. He was born May 2nd, 1925 in London, England, and moved to Canada in 1972. He was mostly a theater actor, taking part in plays like Romeo and Juliet, Othello, and Lolita My Love. It wasn't until 1988 when he was cast as the lead in the Terry Gilliam film The Adventures of Baron Munchausen that he had somewhat of a career resurgence. By this point, he was already in his 60s, but this newfound recognition is what would eventually lead to his casting in The X-Files years down the line. During the latter part of his life, he would make small cameos in films like David Cronenberg's Spider and the sci-fi cult classic The Fifth Element. He would continue acting in theater up until his passing on November 19th, 2011 at 86 years old. The Blessing Way is a solid season opener that will lead into an even better conclusion when we return with the episode Paperclip. I hope you enjoyed today's video. Let me know your thoughts on The Blessing Way down in the comments. Do you like it? Do you hate it? Anyways, I hope you're having a great day. I want to thank you for your support because I could not have made it to 2K without you. Thank you for watching, and as always, stay spooky.
Has Agent Mulder been silenced for good?
We have control.
The only thing more terrifying than the truth
Where are the files?
is what the government will do to hide it.
They'll kill you one of two ways.
Experience the most startling television event of the year.
Don't think I won't do it.
The X-Files, season premiere Friday at 9, 8 Central.